From a young age, we begin to notice which parts of us are accepted and which are not. We adapt. We smile when we want to cry. We agree when we feel confused. And slowly, we build a version of ourselves designed to survive. This version is not false in the beginning. It is strategic. It helps us belong. It protects us from judgment. It makes us feel safe in environments that do not welcome vulnerability. The persona is our way of saying, "Please let me stay." Carl Jung understood that the persona is a necessary adaptation. It helps us function. It allows us to play roles in the world. But what begins as protection often becomes prison. We forget the self we buried beneath the mask. We begin to confuse the mask with the face, the role with the person, the voice with the truth. And as the years pass, the gap grows. The more the persona is rewarded, the more we fear what might happen if we ever put it down. The persona tells us what we must be. It whispers expectations. It hides our depth to protect our image. And yet something inside us always remembers. A quiet presence that knows this mask is not the full story. It never was. The world does not reward authenticity. It rewards performance. It praises those who fit the mold, who follow the script, who play their part without making others uncomfortable. The persona becomes currency. The more convincing it is, the more approval it gains. You learn quickly which version of yourself gets applause. You amplify that version. You hide the rest. You become successful by becoming strategic, but the cost is subtle. With every nod of approval, the true self takes a step further back. Social systems depend on roles: the good student, the strong leader, the agreeable partner. You begin to serve the expectations of others more than the truth of your own being. You survive by becoming what is expected instead of what is real. Carl Jung saw this clearly. He warned that over-identification with the persona leads to emptiness. You are liked but not known. You are accepted but not seen. And though everyone smiles at you, no one ever truly meets you. The mask becomes addictive. It offers security. It provides direction. But it also demands silence. The more you wear it, the more you fear what might happen if you take it off. And so you smile, even when your soul begins to ache. Adaptation offers comfort. It tells you that if you play your part well enough, you will be loved. If you behave, you will belong. If you hide what is inconvenient, life will reward you. But these promises are illusions dressed as safety. The more you adapt, the more fragmented you become. You forget what you actually feel. You forget what you truly want. You become efficient at managing impressions, but clumsy at recognizing your own voice. And that confusion begins to feel permanent. You wake up one day and realize that you do not know who you are without the mask. The laughter feels rehearsed. The confidence feels hollow. The life looks full from the outside, but something vital inside has gone missing. Carl Jung taught that adaptation without awareness leads to alienation. You lose contact with the self. You become a stranger to your own soul. And in that estrangement, anxiety grows, depression deepens. You wonder why nothing truly satisfies. The promise was that adaptation would make life easier. Instead, it made your truth harder to find. The price of pretending is presence. The cost of being liked is authenticity. And no amount of success can fill the absence of the real you. You do everything right. You meet expectations. You check every box. On the surface, your life appears full. But late at night, or in moments of silence, a strange ache rises. A feeling that something essential has been left behind. This discomfort is not failure. It is the first sign of truth. It whispers through the cracks of your achievements. It visits you in stillness. It asks questions you cannot easily answer. Who am I when no one is watching? What part of me has disappeared? The world praises your image. But the self knows what it had to sacrifice to build that image. You gave up parts of your aliveness to be accepted. You buried your real voice to become respected. And now the silence inside has become unbearable. Carl Jung believed that symptoms are messages. Anxiety, emptiness, exhaustion, they are not enemies, they are signals. They tell you that the persona is no longer enough, that your soul is calling for something real, something unperformed, something yours. The moment this discomfort arrives is sacred. It means the mask has started to slip. The life you created is no longer sustainable, not because it failed, but because it never truly reflected who you are. And the self can no longer stay asleep. An inauthentic life is not always dramatic. It often looks successful, but underneath the surface, there is restlessness. You feel tired without knowing why. You laugh at things that do not move you. You stay busy to avoid listening to yourself. You begin to lose touch with joy. Even rest feels mechanical. Conversations feel scripted. You find yourself saying yes when your body feels no. You look in the mirror and feel disconnected from the person staring back at you. You may feel unexplainable sadness, or a constant hum of anxiety. You may succeed and still feel hollow. These are not flaws in your system. They are signs that something vital has gone missing. The soul is asking to be found again. Carl Jung taught that when the authentic self is denied, the unconscious protests. It does not use logic. It speaks through mood, through tension, through misalignment. The further you drift from who you are, the louder these signals become. These symptoms are not problems to fix. They are invitations to return. Beneath the discomfort is an intelligence. It knows what is real. It remembers who you were before you performed. And it will not stop speaking until you listen. There comes a moment when pretending becomes too heavy. The mask that once protected you begins to suffocate you. Success no longer satisfies. Approval no longer soothes. Something inside you whispers that it is time to stop performing and start returning. This call is not loud. It does not arrive in shouts. It comes in questions you cannot ignore. Who am I without this role? What part of me has gone silent? What would I say if I stopped trying to be understood? You begin to feel drawn to slowness. You crave solitude not to escape, but to listen. You notice the difference between what feels alive and what feels rehearsed. The habits of the persona grow thin. The deeper voice begins to rise. Carl Jung believed that this turning point marks the beginning of individuation. The soul begins its quiet revolt against the surface. The ego starts to lose control. And the self begins to emerge through the cracks of the old identity. The call is not a demand, it is an invitation. It will wait as long as you need. But once you hear it, you cannot fully return to sleep. Because something within you has already awakened. And that part wants only one thing, the truth. Beneath the mask lives a self you tried to forget. Not because it was unworthy, but because the world told you it was too much, too emotional, too strange, too raw. So you buried it in silence and learned to call it weakness. The shadow is not your enemy. It is everything you were told not to be. It holds your anger, your sadness, your longing, your creativity. You did not kill these parts. You hid them. And now they wait patiently for your return. Meeting the shadow is unsettling. It shows you what you denied. It reminds you of truths you once swallowed. It brings back the voice you abandoned to fit in. And though it feels unfamiliar, something in you knows it has always been yours. Carl Jung believed that wholeness requires this descent. The light of consciousness is only complete when it touches the dark. You cannot become real by polishing the persona. You become real by reclaiming what you left behind in the dark. This meeting is not dramatic. It may happen in a moment of sadness, in a dream, in silence. But when it comes, it leaves a mark. Because for the first time, you see not a flaw, but a fragment of yourself waiting to be loved. What you reject does not disappear. It waits, hidden in your reactions, echoing through your projections, living in the people you judge. The more you run from it, the more power it holds. The shadow does not fade. It follows. To own it is not to justify it. It is to recognize that it belongs to you. The rage, the envy, the fear, these were not errors. They were parts of your wholeness that never received permission to speak. Now they ask to be seen. You begin to realize that rejecting parts of yourself has never brought peace. It brought fragmentation. It split you into acceptable and unacceptable. But the soul does not care about categories. It wants only to be complete. Carl Jung taught that integration heals what repression cannot. You do not transcend your shadow by denying it. You transform it by including it. Not by indulging it, but by listening without fear, by facing without shame, by naming without escape. Owning what you once rejected is not a collapse. It is a return. A quiet reclaiming of the full range of your being. It is the moment you stop editing yourself for the comfort of others and begin honoring what has always been true within you. Wholeness is not perfection. It is inclusion. It is the capacity to hold your light and your darkness without shame, to see your past without regret, to feel your anger without losing your center, to walk forward without leaving any part behind. Integration is not an idea. It is a practice. It means showing up as your full self even when it feels risky. It means listening to the part of you that was silenced. It means letting truth matter more than image. You stop trying to be good. You start trying to be real. You realize that the self you feared is not dangerous. It is wounded, and what it needs is not exile, but understanding. Not suppression, but space. Not correction, but compassion. Carl Jung believed that the path to individuation passes through the shadow. To become whole is not to avoid the dark, but to walk through it with courage. Every insight begins with honesty. Every transformation begins with truth. Integration is not a destination, it is a rhythm. A relationship with yourself that deepens over time. And through it, you begin to feel something unfamiliar yet deeply known. A sense of peace that does not depend on being liked. A sense of self that no mask can replace. Authenticity feels like coming home and standing exposed at the same time. There is relief in finally being honest. There is fear in no longer hiding. You feel free but uncertain. Seen but vulnerable. It is not comfortable. It is real. To live authentically is to no longer perform. You say what you mean. You feel what arises. You stop rehearsing your identity, and suddenly, the world responds differently. Some people step closer, others step away. You begin to see who truly sees you. This is why it scares us. Authenticity has consequences. You cannot predict how others will react. You may lose approval. You may be misunderstood. You may disappoint expectations that you once worked hard to maintain, but you gain something greater. You gain yourself, not a version shaped by validation, not a copy of someone else's ideal, but the raw, living truth of who you are when no one is scripting you. That truth may not be perfect, but it breathes, and it belongs. Carl Jung knew that authenticity demands courage. Not because the self is dangerous, but because the world often punishes truth. Still, he believed that no outer comfort could replace the inner clarity of living from the core. That is the path of individuation. The world is built on roles. People expect versions of you that match their comfort. To break that script is to risk rejection. To tell the truth is to create distance. Authenticity disrupts, and disruption makes others uneasy. You begin to see how much of life is theater. Conversations that avoid depth. Smiles that hide pain. Agreements that silence intuition. When you choose truth, you stop playing along. You stop nodding when you mean no. You stop shrinking to fit in. There is a cost. You may lose relationships that were built on your silence. You may outgrow places where you once felt safe. You may stand alone for a while. But what you lose in approval, you gain in integrity. Carl Jung understood that real transformation isolates before it connects. The authentic self does not appear to be agreeable. It appears to be strange, even dangerous. But in truth, it is simply unfamiliar to those still living behind their own mask. To risk truth is to trust that what is real will find you, that your voice will call in what is aligned, that your presence will invite others who are also tired of pretending. This is not rebellion, it is return. A return to what matters. Being real does not demand attention. It does not try to impress, it does not beg to be seen. It simply exists, grounded, present, unmoved by performance, unshaken by expectation. There's a quiet power in someone who no longer needs to pretend. Authenticity does not shout, it radiates. It draws others in without effort. Not because it is perfect, but because it is true. In a world built on appearances, truth becomes magnetic. Not loud, not flashy, but deeply recognizable. You stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your path. You begin to trust your own inner alignment more than outer applause. You realize that being understood is less important than being honest. That feeling whole matters more than fitting in. Carl Jung saw the authentic self as the source of inner authority. When you return to it, you stop outsourcing your worth. You stop chasing roles. You no longer need a stage to feel valid. You find your center and build your life around it. The power of being real is not that it makes you special. It is that it makes you whole. And from that wholeness comes clarity. From that clarity comes peace. And from that peace comes the kind of strength no persona can ever imitate. You were not born to perform. You did not come into this world to meet expectations. The child you once were did not ask how to fit in. It asked how to feel, how to explore, how to live without apology. That essence is still alive. Over time, you learned what pleased others. You adapted. You shaped yourself to match the room. You spoke the words that earned praise, but in doing so, you began to drift. You traded presence for performance. And performance is always hungry. The mask may have helped you survive. It may have protected you when you had no choice. But it was never meant to become your identity. It was a layer, not the core. It was a strategy, not the truth. You were always something more. Carl Jung saw the persona as necessary but temporary. It helps you move through the world. But when it becomes fused with the self, it suffocates the soul. Growth begins when you remember that the role you play is not who you are. To reclaim yourself is not rebellion, it is remembrance. A quiet act of returning, of peeling away what was never truly yours, of coming back to the presence that existed before the mask, before the pretending, before you forgot. Your image may impress others, but it does not nourish them. It creates admiration, but not connection. People do not heal from perfection. They heal from presence. They soften when they feel your truth, not your polish. Your truth. The world is filled with performances. What it lacks is honesty. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that sits quietly in the room and allows others to breathe more deeply. This is the real offering of authenticity. It gives permission. When you show up real, others feel safe to do the same. Your vulnerability becomes an invitation. Your presence becomes a mirror. People begin to drop their defenses. Not because you asked them to, but because you showed them how. Carl Jung believed the individual has a responsibility not just to themselves, but to the collective. When one person integrates their truth, it affects the field around them. Your realness becomes medicine, not in volume, in depth, in clarity. You do not need to fix the world, but you can stop adding to its illusion. By being who you are beneath the image, you restore something sacred, something that cannot be faked, something the world has forgotten how to ask for but still deeply needs. At the end of all seeking is not something new. It is something familiar, something ancient. The self you abandoned to survive is still waiting, not angry, not broken. Just quiet, just real. It has always known you would return. Coming home is not dramatic. It is subtle. A shift in breath. A release of tension. A moment of stillness where you recognize yourself without performance. You do not need to prove anything. You simply begin to belong again to your own soul. You remember what joy feels like when it is not performed. What rest feels like when it is not earned. What love feels like when it is not bargained for. These are the gifts that come when you return to the self without condition. Carl Jung wrote that individuation is the process of becoming who you are, not who others expect, not who you pretended to be, but the self that remains after all illusions dissolve. That self has always been whole. It only needed space. You do not need to chase meaning. You need to stop running from it. It lives within you, beneath the mask, beneath the noise, beneath the fear. To come home is to listen again, and in that listening, to live fully, finally, as you are.